Welcome to SelfDiscoveryMedia.com, where we discover the communities that are making a difference in the lives of others. Our self-discovery is something we are all making on our life's journey. Here you will find the people that will be your guidance, that will be your inspiration, that will be there for you in support on your journey of life. Do enjoy. Our next show is... Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of your Global Veteran Stories, right here on SelfDiscoveryMedia.com. I'm your host, Sarah Troy, and my guest today is Dan Blakeley. He and a couple of buddies have written this wonderful book called The 22-Year War. He is a veteran. He served and the second battalion on the 75th Ranger Regiment, deploying 6 times in support of the global war on terror. He graduated from Alpine State University with a bachelor's degree and 2 master's degrees. He started the school solar-powered racing team that designed and built solar-powered racing cars, competing in 5 international races. We actually have one of those. We have an electric car race coming on here, so it's great to see all this alternative coming about. He's transitioning from military to civilian was not easy. Over the years, he had first-hand trend in the veteran community with paralleled his own experiences. It's a lack of understanding of the skills that the veterans bring to the table, their proven leadership, their commitment to teammates, their unwavering desire to increase potential and to be the best, he says. Dan's passion for veteran success and telling their stories was an inspiration for the first book, The 22-Year War. Dan is the co-founder and chief executive officer of United Valor, a company focused on telling the untold stories of the war through all media formats. We have that in common, my dear. We see war glorified, and then we see our soldiers come home and kind of being left by the wayside, and they're dealing with post-traumatic stress, maybe injuries, certainly loss, of companions, and they never come back the same. How can you after what you've seen and what you've been through? And it's extremely hard for other people to understand. And the one thing that I really, really admire is when veterans step up to help other veterans because they know what they need. And so I applaud you on that, because you guys know what you need to support one another. So welcome to the show, Dan.
Of course, yeah. Thank you very much for having me on. I'm excited for this discussion.
So, I mean, clearly not just, the veteran and stopping there, but solar power, I've got to talk about that as well, because I'm glad you're going in that direction. But how, you said it was difficult for you to come back, and you did a few terms, and, you come back, you're here for a while, you amongst your loved ones, and then you go back again. Is there a certain amount of, I can't let my guard down, otherwise it's going to be harder when I go back? I've always got to be a bit on guard?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in Ranger Regiment, Rangers are part of special operations, and our typical rotation is, we train, get ready for deployment in typically 6 to 9 months, then deploy for anywhere from 3 to 6 months, and then return again for 6 to 9 months, train and do it all over again.
Mm.
So it's a constant rotation of either training to fight or being directly in a fight. And so there's definitely a certain sense of, even when you're back here in the US, yes, you're trying to connect with loved ones, and yes, you're trying to be there with friends and family, but ultimately you're training for the next deployment. And so there's definitely that sense of never putting your guard down, always being ready to fight, just being on edge. Um, and it's really difficult to get rid of that.
Mm.
It took, years for me to really kind of let my guards down and understand that, I'm not deploying again. I'm not going anywhere. Yes, the skills that I've learned are going to help me in life, but I need to know how to utilize those skills that I've learned. And to the point that you said in my intro, I didn't do a good job of that. I
Mm.
didn't realize what that looked like for me, really until 8 years later. It took me 8 years in transition to understand what it meant to go from being a veteran, or being a service member, an active duty service member, to being a veteran who could lean on my service to be more successful and help others.
Mm. I don't think people realize that. My dad was in the Second World War, and he was a squadron leader. And at the end of the war, there were about two or three of them left, and they all died young. My dad died at 45, and it
Mm,
was the kind of suck it up, stiff upper lip. Life carries on, and nobody dealt with the stress that they had, and how could they carry on, be the same old jolly person. They're different, and nobody seemed to understand that difference. And I think that isolation is something that can really cripple a person and make them, that you're having to reconnect to everyone on a different level, but they're wanting to reconnect with you on the same level of the person who went away in the first place. And so an education needs to happen to the people who are left behind, that your loved one is not going to come back the same. And
mhm.
there needs to be some sort of teaching of how you can bridge that communication again, because it's an integration for both of you, isn't it? For all concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that it's difficult for a lot of people to put, their finger on and know exactly what that is and like how to help an individual to get reintegrated after they've served. And you're right, past wars, it was, push off those
Mm.
feelings and just try and figure out the best you could. And, they called it shell shock and the 1,000-yard stare and all those different things. And it was just assumed that, well, if you're a veteran, you were going to have that, you were going to deal with it. And it just is what it is. Really, it took until the Vietnam War and, years after until we really understood what PTSD and PTS is and understanding like how it affects people and how to try and reintegrate. And the thing that I've come to, and the reason why I wrote this book was, a lot of veterans are not as open to tell their
Mm.
story. They're not as open to even talk to their family members. I wasn't. I didn't tell my story to my family in its entirety until, I wrote this book. Really, it was right at the beginning of it that I decided, you know what, let me see what it's like to tell my story before I ask others to tell theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And it was me kind of opening up and sharing more of that, and then talking to other veterans and having a podcast of my own and inviting veterans on and asking them to share their story. And it's the feedback that I received from that and the book that really has kind of reinforced what my thoughts were originally. And it was that the way that veterans can recover from, PTS, or maybe they're not going to fully recover, but how they can cope with it is just to acknowledge their service and
Yeah.
to know what their story is and what it means to them and how they can utilize some of the tools and lessons that they've learned in combat, or in training or in all the different things that came around their service, and apply those to their everyday job and not to bottle them up and hold them in
Yeah.
and not share them with others. And one of the most powerful things that I think I've gotten from this book is one of the veterans that we interviewed after the book. So his story's not in it, but he served for 21 years. He read the book and he said, if it wasn't for you guys and writing this book, I would have never told my story to my family.
Mm.
But after reading it and listening to you guys, he was like, I realized that it was important for me to go ahead and open up and start telling my story to my family, to my, uh, you know, co-business owners, to my employees, things like that. And he said, that has opened up the world to me. I thought my service didn't really mean anything. It was
Yeah.
just 21 years of doing something. And I was like, that means the world to
Yeah.
me to hear
Mm.
that just like opening up and letting people in as a veteran really has become kind of an inspiration for many others to open up. And I hope that's what people do. I hope more veterans, read the book, listen to these podcasts, listen to these stories, and realize how therapeutic it can be for them, but then also how much it can enable others around them to grow and be better versions of themselves.
Mm.
And so it's been really cool to kind of see it come full circle this way.
Yeah, I get people saying to me, why do you do veteran things? Because you are anti-war. I'm always looking, can we find another solution before we take up arms? Um, but it is because of that courage and that strength, that tenacity to go through the process and then be of service to others because of
Mhm.
going through that process. And that's kind of the premises of what self-discovery media stands for. Um, you know, um, my veteran show is just one of the genres that I do. But the fundamental common denominator is people who are willing to face their adversity, willing to face their struggles. By going through that process, discovering their strength, discovering their abilities, discovering that what they actually were given to go through is something that they can be in service and helping other people with. And I think the greatest teachers are those that have gone through it, because they're relatable, they understand. And whether it's a veteran, whether it's a person of service, we could be talking about right now, we're through the pandemic, the frontline service, the nurses, the paramedics, even the janitors that are having to clean up, and all of those people that have been going through the pandemic right now. There is going to be a massive, and already is, a post-traumatic stress pandemic going on right now because of what they've had to see. And this is the gift where veterans like yourself can step up and say, okay, it was a different battlefront, but it's the
Mm-hmm.
same mindset, and I have the resources, or I'm here to listen to you. I understand what you're going through. And that's what we need, isn't it? That community of understanding what you're going through and how to be there from one another, because it doesn't matter how many degrees you've got, or how many things you've studied. If you haven't been through it, you don't truly understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that lack of understanding that has that disconnect between, specifically in the veteran and civilian sector, of why there's always issues, and you hear about it all the time, of that disconnect in the workplace, or that
Mm,
inability to communicate with veterans or understand what their full potential is and realize that potential. And you're right, with our frontline workers, they're going to be going through, they're
mm,
starting to, but they're going to be going through that very same thing, as they come out of this pandemic. And then new doctors and new nurses start getting, integrated into the workforce, and they don't realize what
yeah,
those doctors and
yeah,
nurses and first responders have had to go through, hopefully once we get out of this pandemic. um, but there's going to be that certain level of disconnect, and there already is. If you haven't
mm,
worked in an ER, if you haven't had to care for COVID patients, or the patients that don't get the proper care in the time that they need it because COVID is causing slowdowns and issues at the hospitals, like, you're not going to really know how to connect with those people and understand how hard it's been for them. And so
yes,
I agree, there needs to be them telling their stories as well,
yeah,
them having the platform to be able to share and reflect on the things that they've learned. And hopefully it'll get to a point to where it's educating others, future doctors and nurses and things like that, for best practices and how to cope with the stressors of what they've gone through and everything. And hopefully it makes us a better society as a whole.
yeah. I think one of the things we need to take out of the equation altogether is that this is a sense of weakness.
Hmm.
It is not a sense of weakness at all to be going through post-traumatic stress, to any form of trauma, anybody going through any form of trauma, to react to it is human. It is our
Hmm.
human. If we didn't react to it, that is more scary. That's
Yeah.
kind of psychopathic. It's we're human, we're going to react. As I was saying before the show today, BC's in trouble with the amount of floods that we had from a 100-year storm. Roads are washed away. My daughter lost a good friend in a landslide. Literally, towns are underwater. Cattle have been lost. Farms have been lost, and that is a trauma. That's a community trauma, which will
Hmm.
take a long time for people to heal from. But the more people come together as a community, because they understand what each other are going through, they can help each other because everybody's
Hmm.
on the same playing field. But as a veteran, when you know what you went through, as on the front lines there, you know what it's like to face an enemy, or to not even to sleep well at night because the one eye open, to be constantly stressed and on call. So it's a different type of trauma, but nevertheless a trauma, because you can't switch off. And I think that's one of the hardest things of when soldiers come home, or anybody that's on the battlefront there, is how do they switch off without their visions constantly replaying in their mind.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a difficult piece that I've tried to figure out how to grapple with too, but um, I can only share my experience. There
Mm,
have definitely been over the last 18 months of creating this book and doing interviews and things like that, that I have had to readdress some of the trauma that I've gone through,
mm,
relive
mm,
some of the images in my head of, of brothers that I've lost and, had to deal with that. And um, but then I come out of that and I realize, yes, that was traumatic and that was difficult for me at the time. But I know the lessons that I learned from that.
mm,
I knew how to have that mental toughness for the people around me to kind of support them and build them up, and how to really be a leader for others around me during a very traumatic event. And I think that's something that I took away with it. And I know how to process it now, is like when I have those images come back in, it's like, yes, this was traumatic. And I can think about specifically those images, or I can think about the actions and reactions I took after that event to really support, my team and my squad and those around me. And that's what I need to lean in on. And those are
mm.
the types of things that I can reflect on, that, again, I may see the image in my head every once in a while, but that's not what I'm going to cling on to. I'm going to cling
Right.
on to the things that came after it.
Yeah.
And I hope that's what other people can do as well. Again, I can only speak to my experience, but that's how I've been able to kind of cope with reflecting back on those days.
Mm. That's a good tip to, we want to get to the stage where you can talk about it without
Mhm.
feeling it,
Yep.
right? And when you can get to that stage where you can talk about it and the acknowledgement there, the details will always be there, but you no longer feel the pain with it. You can feel sorrow, you can feel sadness, but not that pain that's
Mhm.
associated with it. Then you know that you can get up and talk about it, you can get up and help other people. But if the pain is still associated with it, there's still some work to be done, because we don't want you to be in pain. it
Mhm.
is it's facing what's happened. Like, I don't, do you know Bobby Henline at all?
I don't offhand.
You would love to have him. He's I've interviewed him 3 times. His Hummy blew up, his comrades were lost. He burnt right down to his skull, half of his arm off. And what got him through it is he became a comedian. And,
Wow.
he has good days, he had bad days, he has a, post-traumatic stress dog companion. But it is that choice to kind of feed the humor. That was what got him through it. And I really do recommend a few others I could recommend for you too, that are absolutely exceptional people. Um, and I had him on with another burn victim who had been in a plane crash, and the two of them were talking about how they get through the day, because they're dealing with the physical, never mind the
Mhm.
emotional, the physical as well. And people who listened to the show said they cried, not because they felt sorry for them, but because they were so inspired by them.
Mhm.
And this is the thing, right? The inspiration that we get from these people through the stories that they've shared, who they are today, what service they're in today, is so utterly inspirational and invitational to us. Go, my goodness, if they can do that, having faced that, surely I can face what I'm facing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what is in our book. We have 71 stories of incredible veterans who have done everything from, or not done everything, but have experienced everything from severe burn victims losing appendages all the way through just witnessing their unit getting destroyed while they couldn't step in and do
Mm,
something about it. All different levels of post traumatic stress that you can imagine. But we don't focus in the book wholly on that. We give a small segment to kind of talk about each
yeah.
veteran's combat experience, but then we talk about what they're doing now and
Yes.
why they're incredible people now, and
Yes.
how they've coped with, their PTS, or how they've realized what they did in service is something that they want to continue to do even though they don't wear the uniform anymore. The incredible thing about all the veterans in this book is every single one of them decided to serve and continue to decide to
Mm,
serve after
yeah.
taking off their uniform. They still want to do something. They want to give back. They want to inspire others. They want to encourage others to do better, do more, whatever it is. And whether they're business owners, they're nonprofit, leaders, they're leaders within their community, politicians. I mean, all across the board, just different people just wanting to serve their community. And it's such a powerful thing that I don't know where that comes from, but I do know that veterans, the US military, and maybe this is military globally,
Mhm.
has identified the small segment of people who just want to give to others. And in all my research and doing the book and things like that, one thing that also really inspires me is service members have all different reasons to join the military, whatever it is. But 94% of them look back at their service and still would raise their hand again and serve again, no matter what happened to them in service.
Right.
Good, bad, or indifferent, 94% still would serve again today, which is just so incredible and inspiring to know that about America's veterans.
Mm. You'd say service. Ultimately, what is life about? It is about being in service to one another. We are pack people. We are community people. The village is only as strong as everyone's participation. We're there for each other during the bad times and the good times. And that strength and that joy and that abundance of that village is because everybody stepped up, because we're all in service of one another. And I think we have forgotten this over the last 100 years. Maybe we have forgotten that life is about service. And when you are in such extreme service as, being a soldier, being out there, you are in a service that is literally life threatening. And when you have the gift of coming back, you understand that your service now has to be served in a different way, but the impact of what it can be, the inspiration of what it can be, um, how far reaching you're reaching beyond just veterans. You're reaching beyond maybe that next young person who feels, I want to go to war because it's glorious. And they read the stories and go, not so glorious. You don't go with that mindset. It's not like a video game, right? This is you putting your life on the line, but it also means you're putting the life of your comrade on the line, and that
Mhm.
what you do could affect somebody else. And I think that, it's being glorified, war is being glorified, and we need to kind of bring it back to reality of the responsibility of signing up, what it means, not just to you, but to the people you're working with, but also what it means to your family that you're leaving behind.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a lot there in what you said, and I hope people cling to everything you said because you're exactly right. The gift. There's a quote, and I'm going to butcher this a little bit, but the greatest gift that we have is the ability to give our skill to somebody else, to
Yeah,
pass it on to somebody else, and so it is that service, and it's that ability to help somebody else and prop them up and see them succeed. And I think that's why a lot of service members continue to serve, right? It's people initially enlist or join the military for a myriad of reasons, whether
mhm,
it is to go to war, it is to get an education, it is to go, maybe you have a bad financial situation in your life and you just need a way out, or whatever the case may be. People join for all kinds of different reasons, but I think the reason veterans continue to re-enlist, or service members continue to re-enlist, and why veterans are looking for a way to continue to serve others is because that's what they want to do.
yeah,
They want to continue to help others. There's no greater, I guess, feeling for myself than when I can teach something or teach somebody something new and see that they grasp it and understand it and they utilize that skill that I've just given them. And it's like it's just it you get this warm feeling
yeah,
of like I've accomplished something, I've helped this person, I've done something to make their life easier or better, or whatever the case may be. And I think that's a powerful gift that I think a lot of veterans can share with anybody. Former service members, current service members, veterans, civilians, frontline workers. You've kind of inspired me when you were talking about that, and I think there's something to that. Maybe I'll inspire some veterans to reach out to some frontline workers and do some work there.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's an incredible thing that I think a lot of veterans are seeking that, and they often don't have the avenue to do so.
right. Right. Where
And
do I
that's
go?
what
How do I reach out? I think a lot of the
exactly.
time too is that some come back feeling kind of, well, I don't fit in anymore. I feel useless because I knew exactly what was expected of me. when I was in service. I knew exactly what I had to do. When I come back, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what my skills are. I don't know where to put them. And I think that, that I call it flapping in the wind, where, you're just not landing anywhere. Is how do you, I say this about women who've brought up their children. I'm just a housewife. No, you're not. You're the financial manager, you're the chauffeur, you're the nurse, you're the head cook and chef, you're the sex goddess, you're the counselor, you're everything. You take that accumulated experience and you look to what else can you apply it to that means something to you, because we're all looking to step into some meaningful purpose. And I think for a lot of veterans and a lot that I've spoken to have said that, coming back, it's like, where do I belong now? I've had such
Mhm.
structure. Where do I belong now? Nobody gets me. Nobody knows me anymore. Everybody wants me to be who I used to be. I don't know what to do now. I don't know where to fit in. And they need other people who have been through it to just help them navigate that and kind of their own self-discovery.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the biggest things that I encourage now any veteran transitioning is you're not going to know exactly what you want to do and why you want to do it until you try it and realize that's what you want to do. So I tell them
Yes.
to try everything, get
Yes.
involved in everything, just try it and see what works and what sticks. I see oftentimes a lot of veterans will commit to one career field as soon as they leave, and they find out within months to maybe 2 or 3 years it's not what they were meant to do, it's not what they wanted to do, and then they feel lost again, and then
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to navigate again. um, One of the veterans in our book actually has an incredible story of like giving advice to veterans during transition, and two of the things that he puts in there that I think are incredibly important is to find yourself a mentor, another veteran who's been through the transition process. That one is pretty obvious. Like
Yeah.
we're talking about, yes, connect with your tribe, people who understand you. But the other one, which I think is equally as important, is find a civilian mentor. Find
Yes.
somebody who's willing to connect with you and understand how to navigate the civilian world, whether it's going to school, it's finding a job, it's consulting, it's advocating, it's working in a nonprofit, whatever it is, find a civilian mentor that you can cling to and understand, like now that you're transitioning out of the military, what are the things I need to look for? What are the things I need to avoid? And
Mm.
how can I best, look out for myself and my family? And I think that's such an incredible thing that I didn't think about as a
Mm-hmm.
veteran myself when I first transitioned. It didn't even cross my mind to try and have a civilian mentor.
Right.
But I think it's really important to look for it.
Well, case in point, another couple I've interviewed, um, he was his third wife, because every time he came back, just for such a disconnect. And with his third wife, he would come back and he would start taking command. And she'd go, I'm in command here. You've been away. I'm in command. I will let you know where I need the help, but you can't come in and take over. And through this kind of renegotiating what each other's relationship was within the relationship, they actually started um, a wonderful retreat relationship for um, for veterans or even still being deployed and their partners to reconnect with each other, to recommunicate with each other, to be able to learn to listen to one another and what they really do need. Because I think a lot of the time is that they're talking at cross purposes. Nobody knows how to communicate again, right?
Mhm,
You've been talking in soldiery terms, they're talking civilian terms. Where's the in between lingo that you can find a common ground on? So this is why I say I love veterans who have seen what the need is and set it up. Have this is what I can do. This is how I can help other veterans. But beyond just the veterans, there are other people out there that have gone through trauma. There are other people
mhm,
that are suffering from post-traumatic stress. And so by you guys stepping up and helping one another, you're helping others that are going through this that also haven't found an arena that understands what they're going through.
mhm,
Oh, just suck it up. Isn't it time you got over that? And that's the last thing you need to say to someone, right? And it's having somebody who gets it. I understand. Let me help you navigate through those feelings so that you can look at it without the fear and without the pain. So veterans can go way beyond their own veterans and help the civilians that are in the trauma, as well as the civilians can help with that navigation and communication into coming back into this world.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I feel like the military has gotten better about is, even when I was in, they were very disconnected. You just did what you were told. There was not this like hearing people out and understanding their feelings and getting feedback and
Yeah,
doing like formal counselings and things like that. They started getting better when I was when I was getting out in 2012, but I know they've gotten a lot better in their ability to counsel and listen and have a conversation in that process. And it's something that I tell veterans a lot as well, especially when they have problems in the workplace. It's like these people just don't know what they're talking about. They don't know how to like do X, Y, and Z. They just don't know what they're doing. I said, well, have you taken the time to understand like what they can and can't do, what their skill sets are, what are their capabilities? How can you utilize what they are best at to make sure that they are successful and that you are successful as a team?
yeah,
And when I am able to like explain that to people, how to really utilize people's best ability
mm,
in a team, teams typically will flourish, or they'll find out really who is the weakest link, and they'll figure out how to get rid of it if they get to that point. But veterans, I will say, need to do a better job of listening
yeah,
and need to do a better job of just trying to understand. Because again, I go back to telling your story and being able to utilize the skills that you've learned, like lean on those
yeah,
and explain those. But nobody's going to listen to them if you can't connect with them first.
right.
And so that's the most important piece.
There was a young man, unfortunately, this interview couldn't go to air for other reasons, but um, he's stayed in my mind, and he was a young guy that kept going back. And he said, I openly admit I was a junkie. I could not come back to mainstream. I didn't belong here. So he kept signing up and going back to the front. And it was that adrenaline rush. It's because he never knew how to come down. He was always
Mhm.
living on that alert. And one of his friends dragged him out one day to yoga. What are you talking about? Yoga? That's for handy pansy people. And people like me don't do yoga. It ended up him being so transpired by this yoga that he actually started a whole foundation for veterans coming back to do yoga with their families as a family
Mhm.
unit, to do it together, to bring that vibration down, to get into the same frequency, and to find that breath of commonality. And he said, had you told me, never would I would have laughed in your face, because he went from being an extreme, adrenaline junkie to this calmness. But that case in point is he didn't know how to get there. He didn't know
Mhm.
how to come down until somebody said, you're coming with me, mate. I'm not going to hear a no. And then he saw the results of it. And sometimes that's what somebody needs, isn't it? No, I'm not going to
Mhm.
hear your BS. You're coming with me. We're going to do something. And sometimes some kind force needs to take place.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't tell you the number of people in the book and that I've just talked to in general who were saved by somebody else
Yes,
that
yes,
got them into it, that brought them into the organization and said, "Hey, I know you're struggling, but just come with me,
yeah.
and just come with me today. Put up with it. Just you can
Mm?
gripe and moan after it, but just come with me." And that's such an incredibly powerful thing to have somebody to lean on and somebody who's not going to put up with your BS and say, "No, you're going to come with me. You're going to figure this out, and we're going to do it together." And there's one veteran who's not in our book, but who was an actual junkie who, I interviewed him, and he was hooked on heroin and had extreme issues with addiction and things like that. And it took his now girlfriend constantly yanking him out and saying, "We're going to put you in a different place to where you are not enabled to be
Mm,
able to be a junkie. That you will be with my family. You will have this loving environment that you won't even want to be thinking about drugs."
right.
And it pulled him out of it, and
Yeah.
he was able to recover from it. And
I bet there was
he thought,
resistance though, right?
oh, there was definitely resistance, and but they're in a loving relationship, and they talk about it all the time. He has an incredible following and story and things like that. But
Sounds like there's a
Yeah, I
book
think
too there.
yeah. Oh, there's definitely a book. I've told him multiple times that his story needs to be a book.
Yeah,
I've told him, but it is. It's leaning on others, and I think we just need to get to a point to where we can lean on each other, not just from our tribe,
right.
but just each other as humans.
Yes.
And I wish there was less of this tribalism and
Mm,
more of this just togetherness and ability to talk to your neighbor and talk to,
yeah.
your loved ones and your family and lean on each other and get through difficult times together.
We're all the village.
Yep.
If one person suffers, you suffer. That's the ripple effect. It all has a domino effect. And, the more suffering that is out there, the more it vibrationally brings people down. And, the more hope there is out there, and the more working towards that joy and those possibilities, the more it lifts people up. So we owe it to each other to be there and lift each other up. And who cares about the race, the religion, the sexuality, the politics, the nationality? Let's just look at each other as a human race, because I'm sure while you were over there, you're deemed this is an enemy, but if you sat down with that enemy, you would realize there's far more in common than there is an enemy. And who is the real enemy? Is it the people on the chess set moving the pieces around, making people an enemy? And why do people step into hate? Why do people want to harm one another? Why do people want to dictate and dominate? And if I think we need to put more emphasis on the root of why wars start, as opposed to being so easily to send people to war to die.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. There's a bigger philosophy there behind that, and it's usually wars are fought for ideals, and those
Yeah,
ideals are somebody else's than your own.
yes. And they're
And
not the
it
people on the forefront. They're
exactly.
the chess
It,
piece movers. Yeah.
and there's incredible stories, especially from Vietnam, and there probably will be in the future between Afghanistan and troops
Yes.
that have been on the ground and things, but of soldiers coming back together, the Viet Cong and the
Yeah.
U.S. soldiers and Marines like sitting down together 40 years later and having a discussion about the battle that they were both in, fighting each other, but they both survived, and now they're pen pals or whatever the case may be. And like there's incredible stories like that out there. And I think when more people can read stories like that, and it all comes back to just stories, like getting them
Yes.
out there, the
Yeah.
history, and understanding, like when people can connect to a story like that, then you realize how simple some of these things really are, but how dire the consequences are to get it
Right.
wrong.
Yeah, that there's another gentleman which also didn't hear it because it was a co-host I was working with, which never came to pass. But his story stays with me. And he was in Vietnam and he was drafted. He didn't want to go, didn't believe in the war, but he went, and he was in charge of the equipment, kind of making the roads to bring all the trucks through. And he said one time there was a kid there with a grenade, and he had to get out there, point the gun, and that he would have to shoot that kid. Um, Otherwise, that grenade would blow everything off. And he just had that gun in his hand. He said, "Oh God, please don't let me do this." And it ended up the kid running. And he
Wow.
says, if for him, it haunted him. Now he came back and he burnt his uniform because people were so opposed to Vietnam. They were attacking the people coming back. And so he
Hmm.
burnt his uniform, never told anybody he was, in the forces, had a very, very successful career and company. It's only when he retired, it all came flooding back. He
Wow.
suddenly had the time and everything came flooding back. And it was because he could never share it with anyone, he could never discuss it with anyone, and he was being forced into a situation that he didn't believe in. And he said, if I had killed that kid, it's over for me. I couldn't do it. But it's 40 years later, when he pushed it aside, that suddenly it comes back. And that just shows you have to deal with it, don't you? You have to come face to face with it. And even though you come face to face with it today and everything's fine, there's going to be triggers that will bring memories back. All they are
Hmm.
is memories. Don't get caught up in the trauma of them again. They're memories. Deal with it. Have a good cry. Go through a little therapy or do whatever you need to do to go through that process. But understand it's only a memory. It is not happening now.
Hmm. Yeah. I talk about that. I have an intro in the book, and I talk about something that people usually have a conversation around is that, when you first take off your uniform or you first, or I'll just tell you what they are, but the three phases that I've identified of transition is the very first one is, especially if you're somebody who deploys regularly, um, that sense of not being able to deploy and fight alongside, your brothers and sisters and being there for them. There's a little bit of a loss there and feeling
Mm,
like you're not there to watch out for them,
right.
and there's that initial loss. Then there's the taking off the uniform and being out of the service entirely. You feel like, okay, you're no longer part of this bigger mission, this bigger tribe, and now you're searching for your identity. And
Mm,
then the third piece is when you can really have a self reflection and understand what your service meant to you, and understand that those demons that you may or may not have to deal with are just something that can really strengthen you, and know how to turn that fear and how to process those things into a strength, is when you can become, past that point, and when you've really come out the other end of transition and understood what it meant, and how to positively impact those around you based on your transition. And it took me 8 years to
mm,
figure that out. But every veteran I've talked to that I've explained those three phases of transition to, they're like, that's exactly what it was for me as well.
mm,
And I'm like, yeah. And it doesn't matter. For some people, it may take a few weeks. They could
mm,
figure it out within those first few weeks. It could take somebody 40 years, like you
yeah.
just explained. And it's something that I think, I hope more veterans hear it, and
Mm,
they take it to heart and understand it. And I hope even civilians hear it, and people who've been through trauma
yeah.
hear it, because they're going through the same thing as well. You have to know how to process your memories.
Mm. You can't escape them.
No.
A case in point, the 40 years later, he thought to never be revisited and it revisited. You
Yep.
can't escape it, whether you're a veteran or just an ordinary civilian going through hell, which
Hmm.
plenty of people are on a daily basis, especially with this, pandemic. And as I said, with what we're going through here and the fires and the floods and everything else that's happening around the world. And there's so many people displaced and have loss. And we see you, we hear your pain, we're there for you, our arms are around you, but now we need to help you and give you the strength to go through the process, because
Yeah.
none of it is going to make sense, or you're never not going to know what it means to you until you go through the process and get onto the other side. And it doesn't
Mhm.
diminish the pain that you've gone through, it just shows you how to live with it, or how to not be in pain anymore and find that meaningful purpose of what you're meant to do with it. Because we all
Yeah.
go through these struggles to discover what we're meant to do with it.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, it's a powerful message. Why I continue to do what I'm doing, and why I'm excited, about the book, about the podcast we started, about more things that are to come. It hasn't ended here. There's way too many untold stories out there from war, from the supporting roles of war. The families that had to be there to support the people deploying, and there's just so much more to tell, that I feel like those stories need to get out there, and people can connect with whichever
Yeah.
story suits them.
And, as I said, I've got some people I have to send you because I'm, a veteran to veteran definitely will be powerful.
Mhm.
Scott, I've forgotten his surname, but he wrote a book on Romaldi. It was something that was going on there. And he wrote this book about the struggles of Romaldi, of what happened there, the effects that it had. And I interviewed him when the book first came out, and I re-interviewed him later. And he said he never knew the impact the book would have, of how parents of ones that have been lost have come to him saying, thank you, you've helped us
Mhm.
understand what they went through, you've given me a better understanding of the struggle, of the reason he died or whatever. And it just became a comfort and a clarity for people. So you may be writing it for other veterans, but you're writing it for their families, you're writing it for people who just don't understand what the war is all about. And here you're getting to understand the sacrifices that people are making and the reason behind it. I had somebody on a little while ago, talking about with ISIS back in now, and the Taliban back in now. What does it mean for the future? And a
Yep.
lot of people were, did the Iraqi war, was it worth it anyway if it's right back to where it was? And I said, yes, but it's prevented so much in between, and it's put
Yep.
so much in place now that a 9/11 is unlikely to happen again. Because,
Yep.
and that's the thing, is that we see one side of something, but how about we turn it around and look at it from different angles, and then you'll see there's a lot more to the picture.
Yeah. No, that's you're absolutely right. It's that ability to look around corners and look
Mm,
behind you and understand all the perspectives
yeah.
and not just see what's right in front of you. Because it is easy to see, what's on the news that day or what's on your social media feed
And
that day.
judge, right? Pass
Yep.
judgment. Yeah. Yeah.
And only process what you're seeing,
Yeah.
and instead of actually investigating everything that's going on around it.
Mm,
And it's really easy to be cut off from the conversation or cut off from the action of how you react to it. Um, and that's been one kind of surprising thing to me from a lot of veterans, uh, that I hope more veterans figure this out. But every natural disaster, every event, political disruption, chaos that happens in the world, when we were wearing the uniform, even if you weren't in the room planning a mission, you knew everything that was going on around that mission because you were told by your leaders. Well, once you take the uniform off, it's up to you to figure
mm,
out what's
yeah.
around everything going on
Yeah.
so you have the full situational awareness and so you can make an assessment for yourself.
Right.
And I hope more veterans would lean on that, and we could educate a lot of people with that. And I try and do that with everything I do, is have multiple perspectives on whatever the topic is, so that
Yes.
I'm not speaking from just one side, but I understand all sides.
Right. And it's only through the all sides that we get to see the bigger picture. And in the Celtic runes, they have a stone called Haglas, which is disruption, where you
Mhm.
can't have clarity until you've had the disruption. The disruption shakes everything up and gets rid of what's not needed. It's the house cleaning. And then you can bring into clarity of what really is needed. And it's kind of unfortunate that we have to have Haglas, the disruption, in order to
Mhm.
find clarity. But that goes within our own lives. The disruption is the disconnect, the disconglobulated, and through that is then finding that clarity within yourself. Because as much as you can have people like yourself on the outside helping people, it's still an inside job. You've still got to be willing to do the work from the inside out. You're there to support them, to give them the resources, the tools, and the encouragement. But everybody has to walk their own journey. And it is an
Mhm.
inside out job. And we're all looking for that clarity. We're all looking for that a sense of belonging, that meaningful purpose. What is our service to one another? And that comes from being willing to take our own journey in life, in our own self discovery, with the help of people like yourself who are going to help us navigate it when we feel a little lost or when we don't know what resources or what tool to use. And so people are there for you, but you've got to be willing to participate in your own life and apply.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. However, we can have the greatest impact is by helping others, and we talked about that service and the ability to do that, but just getting the full perspective, you can help more people as well.
Yes, yes. Um, it's like an ingredient in a dish. You're an ingredient, somebody else is an ingredient. With all of those ingredients, you've got a whole dish, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to quickly go into the solar racing. What's this? What's this? I'm intrigued.
Yeah, so when I first so let me back up way to the beginning. So I would have told you I would have never joined the military.
Mhm.
My dad was in the Air Force for 21 years. I knew what it was like to kind of move around and what that experience was like for me. And I didn't think I wanted to join the military. But I wanted to be an engineer, and I looked at that as a way of like how to change the world. How can I like help the best that I can? And it's like invent something new or shape some technology, whatever it is, to help out humanity. And so I eventually ended up joining the military because that was really for me at the time my only way out of the situation that I was in. But after I got out of the military, I said, well, I still want to do something that's going to shape the future. And so I decided to go to school for sustainability, and I went to Appalachian State University. Um, and I'm not somebody who can just sit around and like just do a degree or just do something. So I started this project, the Solar Vehicle Racing Team. It integrated two things that I was really passionate about. I love racing and I love sustainability. And so I built, developed a team and built two solar powered race cars that at that point had only raced in five different races, different parts of the world. But the team has continued past me leaving, and they actually placed first this past
Yay.
summer. Yep, in an international competition. So I've been very thrilled with, I guess, the ability to build that program in the school, and then to see how many students it's
Mm.
impacted, and how many are continuing to go through that program and learn an incredible amount of skills they would have never gained really
Right.
anywhere else in their college education. So it's been very cool to see it happen.
Well, they're our future leaders. So the more
Hmm.
we open up that wonder creative possibility, by seeding what's possible, what's
Yeah.
next, let's explore. And you've given them a base point with the solar panel cars, and to see that they get up into first, this is possible. It not only is a pride thing for them, but it shows to the rest of the world that there are alternatives, and
Hmm.
with those alternatives is more ecological, it's more friendly, and we've really got to look at this planet, because the next battlefront is the planet that we are destroying. Right. So
Yep.
we had here many years ago motor car racing here in Vancouver, BC, and then they stopped it because the building up too much. Well, now they're going to do it again this year, but with electric cars. So there isn't any noise barrier. And like,
Hmm.
oh, I thought electric cars could only go slow. Have you driven one? They can
Yep.
go like a bat out of hell, right? So, you know, I, every time people see this, they go, I didn't know. Now you do know. Now you know what's possible. So that makes
Mhm.
change so much easier, doesn't it? Because
Yeah.
somebody has shown you the possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a program that the university would have never, maybe they would have down the line, but something I don't think they probably would have invested in.
Mhm.
But now they've developed an entire program around it, and students will flood through it. Students are coming to that university just to be part of that program.
Right.
There are
Wonderful.
students
Whoa.
attending there that would have never gone to App State, but because of this program, they're going. But to your point, traveling across the world, being a part of, the face, really, they've become kind of the face of App State, and
Mm.
they're going to all these different events and showing off the car and showing what's possible. And it inspires. You're
Yes.
absolutely right. It inspires other people to realize, wow, if they are able to, these
Mm.
college students are able to build something like this and show that it's possible, why can't we lean on other industries to invent and create something truly incredible that's capable of doing everything that we thought was impossible for this, say, transportation, and they're proving today that it is possible.
Right. But I mean, look at the diversity of you. You've written this book. Ignited a solar panel car system that's now in the school mainstream and opening up to all sorts of industry and possibilities. You're obviously a forward thinker. You're obviously an innovator. So, yeah, you've done the book, you've done the solar panel. What's next for you? And the
Um,
podcasting coming up, of course. Yes, right. So,
I I want to continue to do much of the same. I tell people that I naturally want to be a facilitator and an enabler. So I want to facilitate anything that can make people's lives better, easier, more economical, gain more skills, whatever the case may be. And then I want to enable them to continue that success. And so something that I've been, teetering with back and forth, but we're going to continue within United Valor, the books, the storytelling, the content creation, everything around that. But then for me, myself, I see a bigger vision for the future, and specifically to enable veterans to find their success and continue their success after they take the uniform off. whether that's through entrepreneurship, that's starting up their own nonprofits, that's finding those executive roles within, Fortune 500 companies, or just, being a leader of their church or their school or whatever it may be. I'm going to create a community that will enable veterans to do that.
Excellent. Excellent. And, you know, we learn through other people's stories. We're inspired. I always say it's inspiration begets invitation. And when we're inspired by other people, it invites us to believe, well, if that was possible for them, what's possible for me? And I think a lot of the time, society has limited us by telling us that we must fit into this box. And when we see people who, people say, oh, do you interview celebrities? I said, everybody's a celebrity that I interview. And I interview ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Because we're inclined to look up pedestal, at the, I'm not going to mention a few names, the hierarchy of the world and worship them. But they're ordinary people who are doing extraordinary things or who just have got very, very lucky because they know how to use social media. And you can be that kind of person too, if you want. But the most important thing is it coming from your heart? Is it a driven purpose that you want to achieve? Who does it serve? Because if we could step more from the heart, kindness, caring, lovingness, into serving one another, we'll find our meaningful purpose. We'll be a better society. And people will be more on a level playing field because everybody will believe that they can and not that they're limited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It goes back to what you're saying. We're all part of the same village. And if we can enable ourselves, if we can enable those around us to grow, the village will continue to grow and prosper.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what we got to lean in on. And I'm excited to continue to do so. And hopefully I'll inspire many others to continue to do so.
You're on the right track, my darling. You're on the right track. How do people get hold of this book? I know you've got your 2 sites. So how do people get hold of the book, and how do they get hold of part of, is it United Valor? Sorry, what's
That's
that?
right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
weareunitedvalor.com. So that is your website where you offer the resources. Your podcast is there, the journal, and how people can contact you. Also, they can get hold of the book, but the book has its own site as well, right?
That's correct. It's 20yearwar.com. It doesn't matter how you spell 20. It could be 20 or spell out 20. And either way, it'll take you to the website. So 20yearwar.com, you can find it there.
And your podcast is Never Left Behind. I love that. That's wonderful. And, it's, you continue to honor, the people that have, that you've either served with or just are in service, but as I said, it inspires others. I certainly do have some people I want to send your way because I think
Please
that
do.
you'll do them justice and you really will enjoy them as well. But ultimately, bottom line of it is that every single one of us is here to contribute. We're all part of the equation on this planet. Our lifetimes are to step into service and do it from a place of heart because we care, because we can, and because we want to. And service is not something, oh, I got to be of service. No, being of service is actually where the real joy is, making a difference in somebody else's life, lifting someone else, helping someone redirect, igniting those possibilities. That is the service that we're talking about. And it is so utterly rewarding, isn't it?
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it any better myself.
Thank you so much for sharing with us here today. I really, really enjoyed this. I love what you're doing. And again, folks, it's weareunitedvalor.com and it's the 20yearwar.com for the book. It's Christmas, folks. This is a good time to actually give this book to people, whether they have somebody in service or not. While people are up from their couch passing judgment, and, it's like, read the book, hear the stories. Yes, it may be about the actual soldiers and the veterans that have served, but you're going to see so much similarity just in parallel people or who have stepped into service in life, those that are sacrificed for you. And again, it's an invitation. What is our contribution? Because every single one of us is here to contribute one way or the other. So thank you so much for sharing here today. Please keep on keeping on. Let your inspiration keep flying because you're clearly inspiring others.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate it. This has been great.
Until next time, folks, remember we are all the answer. We've just got to open up. Until next time, bye for now. We hope that you enjoyed the show. You will hear many, many shows here on SelfDiscoveryMedia.com. We have new shows for you out every week. Just find them on our podcast or What's New. If you feel that you have something to share that makes a difference in the lives of others, or you too feel that you could be a host, please contact me at info@selfdiscoverymedia.com and we will be glad to speak with you. Have a wonderful day.